Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this very, very, very special Simple Coach to Commissioner interview. Do appreciate you taking the time, checking in. I am a trailblazer. I am a trailblazer of Division 3. I'm a trailblazer in YouTube influencing. Mr. Beast has nothing on me. And today I am so very excited to be joined by Katie Boldvich, I think I got that right, who is the Landmark Conference Commissioner. Yes, very intentional on that because they've been in the news quite a bit, but there's some really great things that are happening at the Landmark Conference that I really wanted to uncover. So here we are. Commissioner Boldvich, really do appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much to join me on all things Division 3 soccer, even though we won't be talking all about soccer, but you get the gist.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. I appreciate it.
Hey, let's just start out with some basics, right? Like the softball. Hey, here you go. I did read your bio, but maybe you could just sort of talk to me a little bit about sort of your journey. And I'm always like, how do people get jobs as commissioner of a conference? I mean, that's
Yeah, I always say, because this is always the first question I get answered, or when I guest lecture for, MBA or sport leadership majors, I need a better answer for how you become a commissioner because, like, I still haven't nailed it yet, and I've been asked that question for years. So I grew up playing all sports in South Jersey. When it came time to go to college, I knew I really wanted to keep playing at least one sport, and I was very fortunate to get to play two sports at Emerson College, Division 3 school in Boston. So I played soccer and
yeah,
softball there all 4 years. It was a great experience. Emerson is a communication film nerd school, and I wanted to go be a
very.
film in LA. I wanted to be like Jerry Bruckheimer for sure and make more like feel good sport miracle type movies. Got involved in live athletic coverage out there, bumped around, came back east. That's a story all on its own. Started working with the Boston Celtics for a few years. That was awesome. Produced their pre and post game shows. But I really missed spending time with my husband and seeing friends and family.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'm one of the few,
important.
yeah, kind of important. Right? So I feel like I'm one of the few people that left a career track to get more family time in collegiate athletics because
Yeah.
everyone will tell you it's the exact opposite. So I was in sports television for 5 years and then kind of just started over and went back to my alma mater, helped coach, did very basic low level jobs in the athletic department, like confirming the buses, ordering pizza, like all that kind of stuff.
Important
Just get
stuff. The
my foot,
pizza. Important stuff.
yeah,
The
get
pizza.
my foot in the door. And then I just basically slowly worked my way up.
Hmm.
So did some consulting work, made some good connections, and the Landmark is my second full-time commissioner job. So I'm really happy. This is year 5. I feel fortunate to work with them. I'm a little biased, but I do think they're some of the best schools in Division 3 and best people that work there. So I'm very lucky.
What may I ask? What conference were you commissioner of before the Landmark?
In 2017, I worked with the NECC, New England Collegiate
Oh
Conference.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yep.
okay. Um, that's interesting. Like keep yeah, you got to nail that a little bit better because
Yeah,
you got to that Hollywood stint. You got to really talk up. Maybe like, yeah, I
like
was this
really
really
lean in.
famous producer.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. Like my first like real full-time job in college athletics was with the ECAC.
Hmm. Yeah,
And it's
me too.
funny, I had applied for a job to go oversee all of their championships. So for East Coast people, I think they really know what the ECAC is. They kind
Yeah,
of do NIT type championships in
yeah.
all sports, and they're a little regional. I didn't get that job, but they offered me an opportunity to work with the hockey leagues and
Hmm.
affiliates.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I started, and it was a conference oversight without being a conference
Yeah.
oversight. So from the beginning, I just got, a lot of work and opportunity in conference operations and legislation and
Mhm.
bylaw writing and budgeting. So ultimately, I think my background there really shaped me to be able to continue to do that. And
Right.
I really liked it. So.
Yeah, yeah. D- when you get hired as a commissioner, are you like given a mandate? Like you are the president's hire you, say, "Hey, you're the go-to person." Do you, are you sort of like, this is what we want, or this is how we want the conference to go, and then we want you to execute on that? And if so, did you have something similar with the landmark?
Yeah, so all conferences will have kind of like a vision or a mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
And just like I think in any world, some really adhere to that and follow it, and it's rooted in
Yeah.
everything they do. And others, it's a nice thing to put on their website.
Yeah.
Definitely part of the application process was, what do you see as the future of the landmark?
Mm.
What do you think our opportunities are? What could we be doing better? What do we do really well? So when I went into those interviews, like I was ready to roll with
Mm-hmm.
what I thought they did really well. And, if given the opportunity, changes that, we could work through together.
Mm-hmm.
So year one with them was 1920. There was this small worldwide pandemic that happened in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So a lot of changes and ideas were put on hold a little, but I feel we came out of that
Mm-hmm.
amazing and have done a lot of things in a short period of time.
Yeah. You can't you can't help but notice that. Let me ask you, what sort of appeals to you about Division 3 sports that may be unique to it, or I mean, I don't know. Do you have aspirations to, jump to to some Division 1 conferences, or is this sort of thing that you really enjoy? Or
That's another question I get asked a lot, but I've nailed this one. Uh, so I'm a Division 3 homer. I
Mhm.
think Division 3 is exactly what was meant when colleges wanted to start amateur competition in the late 1800s and start playing sport against regional opponents. When you look at what's going on in Division 1 right now, that's just not a student athlete centric model. It drives
Kidding
me
me?
crazy.
Yeah.
So I know I'm a homer, but being a Division 3 student athlete, being a Division 3 coach, being a Division 3 administrator, and now getting to be a Division 3 conference commissioner at a few different conferences, I think Division 3 does it right.
Hmm.
And I really think the landmark does it right within Division 3. I've worked with a lot of different schools over the last decade, and the experiences our institutions are providing those student athletes, whether it just be with resources, facilities, equipment, gear, the opportunity to do foreign tours, um, additional resources for them outside the season in regards to programming and mental health support. Our schools are all in, and I think those are all the things that get lost in the big picture of media sometimes when they're bashing the NCAA and these schools because it's such a small subset
Hmm.
of so many in the NCAA and competing and doing it the right way.
Hmm. That actually leads to another question I just thought of. Like, I mean, being you interact with presidents, all the presidents of all the different schools in the conference. Like, how? I mean, are they? You kind of mentioned it. Are they bought into sort of the athletic? I don't want to say mission, but the student athlete athletic mission that Division 3 brings.
I think ours are, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be different how presidents engage within their conference. Part of an NCAA bylaws legislation is all decision making is done by the institutional presidents.
Mm-hmm.
Some schools are really engaged that way and know what's going on and know what changes might be coming or might need to be made.
Mm-hmm.
Some are great about it, some aren't so great about it.
Yeah.
The landmark, I feel fortunate. Our presidents come together multiple times a year. They meet in person together. They allow our athletic directors to come meet with them for a portion of that in person
Mm-hmm.
meeting. So I feel fortunate because I think it's definitely an anomaly to get that FaceTime with all
Yeah.
of the presidents. And it's
Hmm.
kind of neat that, like, the Scranton AD could follow up on a question or viewpoint from the Drew AD or
Hmm.
Drew president,
Hmm.
and you kind of get that um, overlapping
Yeah.
conversations. And I think that's part of what's made our conference strong, and the ability to have autonomous conversations between our different leadership groups.
Yeah. How much interaction do you have with the athletic directors? That might be a silly question, but you're my first, so
Yeah,
I'm like,
probably every day.
uh-huh.
I sent a group text message last night about the phone thing that's coming on Wednesday, where everyone's phone's supposed to go off
Yeah.
at
Okay.
2:20, and it's like an emergency alert test.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, guys, don't freak out if you have a meeting. I don't know if you saw this, and it was so funny because a few of the ADs were like, "Thanks, mom," like super helpful.
Yeah.
So they're great. Like, I'm really lucky. Our ADs are an excellent group, and they genuinely enjoy spending time together. So I
Hmm.
think when we try to implement things or change something, or have an idea, it's easy to get it done because they're competitors on the field, but they are truly colleagues,
Hmm.
and they enjoy each other's company. So I get to see them actually a week from today. We have our in-person fall meeting and social. So we'll all spend time together, be able to have dinner, and then have a full day of meetings.
Hmm.
Hopefully, get some good things done.
Th- that's interesting because I'm convinced. I'm convinced of like the higher up in the stratosphere you go in terms of athletics, meaning that if you say
Yeah,
Division 1 is the pinnacle of it, I'm convinced that some of these presidents that manage, 100 and I don't know, $1 billion institution,
yeah,
athletics, while important, they hire the athletic director to deal with it all, and so it's interesting to hear that there's a lot, they're closer to the athletic world than what probably is perceived, maybe
yeah.
I
I
don't know.
I think, especially in Division 3, and even more specifically with some of the smaller privates, athletics is a huge part of it, retention and enrollment.
Hmm.
So, their presidents are really engaged with knowing, like, roster sizes and what recruiting numbers are, or if you have a shift of student athlete or student population, from men to women, that's not a 50-50. They're being, very perceptive to, hey, we have 60% female student athletes. Should we consider adding a male sport that might
Hmm.
help raise our male population and make them more equitable, or vice versa?
Hmm.
What women's sports can we add to provide opportunity for our female, population? So they do a really good job. We look at everything. Most of our schools sponsor over 20 sports, which is pretty high. We have 23 sports as the landmark. So I think they do a really good job in that. And if you're more interested in how presidents view athletics as a key part of the health of the institution,
Hmm.
Adrian College's president, Jeff Docking, has written an amazing book on basically how athletics saved Adrian College, which is a super small Division 3
Yeah,
school outside of
very,
Detroit.
yeah,
Um,
very
it's
familiar
the
with them.
only thing
Yeah.
in town. Like, there's
Yep.
not much to
Mm-mm.
Adrian. The college is certainly at the center of it. And through my work with ice hockey, I had the opportunity to travel out there. They hosted the women's Frozen Four, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, maybe 6 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to spend a lot of time with him. And we've remained good friends, and it's just so interesting to me that
Mm-hmm.
he had this vision of what athletics was going to mean at Adrian, and he's built this infrastructure there that's jaw dropping. Like,
Yeah.
their facilities, their rink, their gym, even that general students use it. It's amazing. And they have some really interesting varsity sports there.
Yeah.
Varsity cornhole, bass
Yeah.
fishing.
Yeah.
They run the gamut. It's a really cool model.
This is totally as an aside. I forget who I was speaking with, but someone told me, and Adrian, I played them back when I was when I was all that. and and or thought I was all that. Um, and they are in the middle. Like it's nothing. It's
Yeah.
like it's Adrian, and this is the community. It's the community. It's the college. It's everything. And somebody told me that whatever they have done there, from an athletic standpoint, student athletic standpoint, they sort of showed the rest of Division III sports the importance of a well placed athletic strategy from an institutional standpoint. I'm not saying individual sports,
Yeah.
but if you approach it in this way, you will find success as a college or a small university. Because if they
Yeah.
can do it, anybody can, right? Like I think that was the comment. Adrian's nothing, right? I mean that
Yeah.
respectfully, but
Yeah.
like that's how
Yeah.
significant of what they did.
It's amazing. Yeah, their operations are incredible, and they're someone I'm always keeping an eye on
Yeah.
because Jeff's a great idea guy.
I'm going to reach out. Maybe I'll do a president next. Ooh, that would be good. I would love to
There
talk
you
to.
go.
Yeah, maybe I'll reach out.
He used to chair President's Council, so I
Uh-huh.
feel like he could be open to it for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Okay. Um okay, back to this. Let me ask you, like, forward thinking, like, and we're going to talk about some of the cool things you've done as far as I know,
Okay.
but my little limited knowledge. But what, like, where do you see the landmark in 5 years? Because you've done things, and we'll talk about them, that
Yeah.
are different. I'll just say that. Or
Okay. Um, I don't know. Um,
good answer. I like those
yeah,
answers. Like that's an honest answer if you have.
it's I'm a very like, okay, we did it, what next? Like
Yeah,
I'm a
I like
very
that.
goal oriented, final product oriented person.
Hmm.
So I'm actually awful at once we do something, I don't typically enjoy it. I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, what
it's a,
what what is next? What are we
yeah.
doing? So I know we'll get into it, but I'd say we've done three major things as a conference in regards to member expansion, sport expansion, and obviously multimedia.
Hmm.
So right now, I'm trying to take a step back and enjoy what we've done, see how it's impacting our current institutions, and
Hmm.
then trying to take a more holistic approach on what could be next. And
Hmm.
that might involve new sports, that might involve new initiatives. Um, my overall goal for the landmark is, again, I say it, I know I'm biased. I love our group of people that I get to work with. I just want the landmark consistently thought of in conversations when folks are talking about the strongest athletic conference and institutions in Division III. And
Hmm.
I think we've made leaps and bounds over the last 5 years just with across multiple sports, the additional Pool C bids
Hmm.
our conference is receiving. Like we're getting on that national stage, and I just want to make sure we're consistently in those conversations and are a well respected conference that does
Hmm.
things the right way.
It just thought of this one. Is there like I gotta believe, right? I gotta believe because you are a sports person. You're at heart to me. You're like the Division III student athlete that you never left, right? Like at some point, it's like me, just so grounded back
Yeah.
in what you did. Like, is there competitiveness between the conferences?
Oh
So,
God, yeah.
yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yes, one of my best friends, my best friend.
Hmm.
He's the commissioner of the NUMAC
Uh-huh.
up
Yeah,
in
yeah. Up in
Washington.
Massachusetts. Yeah, that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep count of every time one of my schools beats one of his schools, and we have like a going tally in the year to see who wins. And I love to give him a hard time about it.
Yeah.
Like we, at the end of the day, same with our, our ads. Like we want everyone to be successful, and we
Yeah.
all have friendships or closer relationships with people, but we take notice who wins. And
Nice.
it's funny. I'm close with the NESCAC commissioner as well, Andrea Savage. And I'm always like, man, everyone hates the NESCAC. You're so good at everything, and come on, like,
Share with
so
the
it's
rest.
yeah, it's all in good fun. But I love to give them a hard time about stuff. When Juniata was in the women's volleyball.
Volleyball, which are
Oh,
very,
fine.
very
Yeah,
like
they're a powerhouse.
outrageous.
Um, the school they were playing, the commissioner was there, and he and I are good friends. And he was like, "Hey, good to see you. You want to watch the game?" I'm like, "No, I don't want to watch the national championship with you because we can never really cheer, right?
Yeah,
Because in a typical landmark game, you just want it to be
yeah,
clean, no injuries, just a good, hard fought game, right? But when you're going up against someone else, like, all right, now I get to take a stand and so it was awesome because I was standing with their president and I got to meet a few of the parents that had
hmm
traveled out to Pittsburgh and I did not want to be like a tied up
yeah,
collegial commissioner
yeah,
with my colleagues in the press box for
yeah,
that. I wanted to be like with the
yeah,
fans like yelling and like living and dying with every point and it was
yeah,
so fun and they won and that was a surreal experience. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
yeah. That's
So
interesting.
yeah, we're still a little competitive from our
Okay.
glory days of being college athletes for
Do
sure.
you I mean, does it extend to like, hey, the NESCAC is structured a certain way and this is how they do things. Hey,
Yep,
let's keep an eye. I want to be do that what they do, but I want to do it better. Does that extend to that as well? Kind of
100%.
the reason why I'm asking is just because I'm thinking like, the division again, I hate to make the comparison, so I apologize, but the
That's okay.
division 1 conferences are at each other's throat. Like they just want to kill each other. Like right?
Yeah.
Like they want to, hey, how do we just beat and pulverize the conference next door and how do we so I'm just curious, not that it's to
Yeah.
that extent, but
No, I mean it's all in good fun, but I want to be better than everybody.
yeah.
Like I want the landmark to be better at everyone and everything, whether it's like the t-shirts we give our champions are better
hmm
than everybody else. Like our website looks better than everybody else.
hmm
Our big like we got these foam board ticket signs last year. So
hmm
for our HU sports, like the teams could punch their tickets and
hmm
I knew a few other colleagues were doing that, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna be even more extra. So I got like personalized stickers for the teams, so they could literally like slap their logo on it. I got personalized Sharpie landmark markers that say like landmark champs, so the kids could sign it after. So my ADs always make fun of me because they're like, "Oh my God, you're so extra with the brand," and I'm like, "No, I
Yeah.
want to do more. I want it
Yeah.
to always be a good experience." But with that being said, we definitely have benchmark conferences
hmm
that we look at policies and procedures
Yeah.
and how they operate and function and we best practice share all the time. Like as
Yeah.
much as I say I want to be better than everybody else,
Yeah.
I'd give anybody like vendor contacts,
Yeah. Yeah.
approaches,
Yeah.
resources anytime. Like I want Division 3 to be better, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would definitely love Landmark to be in that like top
Yeah.
1% for
I
sure.
will say like that's probably I'm sure some of it happens at all levels, but I would think that that's particularly keen at the Division 3 level just because I don't want to say chip on the shoulder, right? But there's a little bit of a chip on the shoulder about Division 3, and I think there's like this interest in soccer, right? Like in the U.S. soccer, right? There's people who have a chip on the shoulder about U.S. soccer, and
Yeah.
so there's always, hey, how do we be better? And so they're okay with sort of partnering, sharing, and stuff like that. And I think that's particularly keen at the Division 3 level, and that we want Division 3 overall to be better, right? Like, and I think that's sort of my strange sort of approach to all of this is how do you make Division 3 a little the prominence of Division 3 more so than and get credit for what it does. Um,
Yeah.
couple things. So this one's a good one because I didn't realize all this stuff. Like how intent are you about raising the profile of the landmark? And the reason why I'm asking it that way is because I know there are two things that I think were pretty awesome, significant. I don't know if those are the right words, but from my point of view, one was I couldn't help but notice the news and notoriety around the new football, effectively the new football conference, right? Like, and Wilkes and Lycoming joining at the same time, right? That to me is, I don't want to say that's big news, right?
Yep.
The other one, which I think is awesome, really is the Palestra game day for hoops. So for anyone watching, even if you don't go to watch a basketball game, go to the Palestra because it is one of the iconic basketball arenas. I think they do more, but that is absolutely astounding. And to me, it would be like as a Division 3 soccer player getting to play a game at, I don't know what's an iconic Creighton, like whatever Creighton's
Yeah.
soccer stadium is, or Duke being able to play down there in Maryland. Like it's that level. So that's why I was asking, like, so what is the focus on the profile, and are these some of the things, and do you have more more that you're considering, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So from my interviews with the Landmark, I always thought that 8 conference members was a precarious number. And I think 10 members is the ideal number for any conference. And the reason I say that is because you used to need 7 schools to have an automatic qualifier in the sport. They've since changed that to 6. I felt like 8 was just too close to those numbers. 10 in most sports will give you 9 or 18 conference contests. That's a good amount of contests to play in league and then still schedule a strong non-conference schedule. 10 is an even number. It makes scheduling generally easy if everyone is sponsoring the same sports. So it was funny when I came in, that was my one, like, man, 8 is not great. I think we should be at 10. And a lot of people I was speaking with about the job, they were like, be careful with that. Like, the conference is really strong and really happy at 8. So just be careful how you approach that. But I was pretty outward with how important I thought it was from the beginning. Our presidents and ADs were really receptive. We did a full crazy study on a variety of demographics that were important to the ADs and the presidents when we were looking for our members. And we took probably a very different approach to membership than anyone else does. We went after the schools. We didn't have them apply. We kind of gathered all of this data and said, this is why we think you're perfect for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking to both of you. We're taking our poker sunglasses off. Like, we want you both to know our plans and our intentions, and this is why you're great, and football's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? And I was really lucky that it worked itself out. They were very receptive and interested in joining these schools and aligning themselves with our current institutions. And I know we're only a month in of them officially playing in the Landmark, but it's been great. So very intentional. The data we collected and reviewed as a group was like this thick.
Something you can't email.
Yeah, something you definitely can't email. On a ton of different institutions. Like, we looked at everything from just enrollment to endowment to what the facilities look like, what their roster sizes look like, you name it, we probably looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
And, from the get-go, they were the 2 best partners in the space. So I'm really happy it's them. And then just from a national prominence perspective, I hate to say it, but I do think it's true. The conferences with football are treated differently than the conferences without football.
Totally.
And
Without a doubt.
There's a different perception from an outsider of what sports your conference sponsors, and even more specifically, do they sponsor football? So I really felt football was a key part of that equation for us to consistently be thought of at the national level. And I think it even comes down to a lot of different things, like coaches and administrators getting on NCAA committees and having the opportunities to have their voices heard at the regional and national level. Like, that's a huge part of it. So football was big for us, and even when we were at 8, I think it's lost on some people, like, oh, brand new football conference, but half of our schools were playing football. As a conference of 8, we did have 4 schools playing elsewhere. So that wasn't always the best experience for the student athletes either, because, like, they didn't get to do Landmark SAC. They didn't get the same stuff when they won a championship as their soccer roommate got. So being able to bring all those sports under one umbrella was really attractive to our schools that were competing as associate members elsewhere. So, that both huge parts of
And they
the
would,
race.
I mean, the interesting thing you raised about that, right, is like I know in football, I have a lot of, just because of where University of Mount Union,
Yeah,
football, hey, good, bad, whatever,
yeah,
football changed that school. And I would argue it's changed it totally for the better. Like just success, having a football program, the OAC is from a
yeah,
football standpoint now basketball and just a lot of athletics. I think it all stemmed from having this pretty awesome conference, football conference, right? Like I just
yeah,
think that's the reality. But there was always something odd about, like, you could see teams before having the landmark football conference traveling to go play Merchant Marine or whoever was in that amalgamated conference thing or they
yeah,
were affiliated with. It just never, I don't know, like you said, it doesn't have the same. And you're right. I just think institutions athletically to be taken seriously, they have to have the major prominent sports, right? Like again,
yeah,
soccer I think is major prominent, but football, basketball, right? Like I think those are
yeah.
big deals. So,
And I think it helps, our members without football have been really supportive as
mm-hmm,
well. And I've
mm-hmm,
tried to be very cognitive about not treating football too specially, not
yeah,
just focusing on all that's like, yes, we're adding a new sport. It's not every year we add a new sport. It's not
yeah,
every year we add a sport like football.
yeah,
Uh, but I'm still, we want to make sure our other four institutions feel heard,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that like one voice isn't more important in the room. So I think we're doing a good job with that. Um,
Yeah, I
I
think that's a big
would,
deal, though, right? Like I do think because again, like you go to a school that has this powerhouse of a football program, and then any other sport, you just sort of feel like, yeah, we're left out of the limelight for whatever reason. And I do think that that's good that you're trying to be like, look, it has nothing to do with football. It's just a sport. Everyone is
yeah,
here equally, right? Do you see like bringing in more schools, or is it 10? Was that I know you said ten's the perfect number.
yeah. I think 10's a perfect number. Never say never.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still unclear what the enrollment drop is going to do nationally,
Mm-hmm.
what other dominoes fall within region and in
Right.
Division Three. So
Mm-hmm.
you never really
Yeah.
know what opportunities might be out there, but you also don't want the room to get too large. I think
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
big part of it. And then you think about student athlete experience and championship access,
Mm-hmm.
getting much further away from the AQ number.
Mm-hmm.
That now in
Yeah.
some way is limiting opportunity for student athletes to be able to access NCAA championships, which for many that's a pinnacle of their collegiate athletic career.
Yeah.
So to make that harder to obtain, I think we're aware of even silly things like the number of players on an all conference team.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
overhauled that this year because we added two schools.
Yeah.
So you're talking about another 22 starters in
Yeah.
soccer that are vying for those coveted
Yeah.
spots, right? So
Yeah.
we want to make sure that they're being appropriately recognized,
Yeah.
for all that they're doing.
Yeah. 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 I never even thought that's interesting because I never thought about the right. Yeah, I'm never constrained by those things, so I get
Yeah,
to pick whatever I want, whoever I want. Like you guys, that is true. Like you have to, there has to be an avenue for each school to recognize those athletes that they consider special, one
yeah,
way or the other. And so I never even thought about that would have an impact. Adding two programs effectively, and what does that
yeah.
do from there? Yeah, I never even thought of
And
that.
even our postseason access. So one of the things I did love about the landmark is how selective conference postseason was. They took
Mm-hmm.
top four,
Mm-hmm.
50%. So now if we go to 10 and take four,
Yeah.
yikes.
Yeah.
So we're still working through our
Yeah.
postseason model, but this year we expanded a little bit, so it's 60%. So we're gonna have
Yeah.
top six.
Yeah.
with first round games, 1 and 2 get rewarded for being 1 and 2 and
Yeah.
advance to semis. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But that's another piece like we really had to look at. We couldn't just
Yeah.
keep things status quo because now we're in some way lessening that experience for our student athletes. So
Yeah.
a lot went into the thought of going to 10 and what that would mean. So when I think about 12, all of those things would have to be thought about
Yeah.
if there was ever going to be additional
Yeah.
schools or
I
programs.
could see why the size of the conference now matters. Well, not now, but right, because you have the what is it, the Mid Atlantic Conference is broken
The
into
math,
two.
yeah.
The MAC is divided into basically two sub conferences. Like that to me has got to be a nightmare, right? Like, and how do you
Well,
manage that?
that's interesting too, because there's some weird NCAA legislation that allows them to have two AQs.
Uh,
So if someone wanted to do that now, they couldn't do it.
yeah.
But the MAC
Oh,
has been
so if the
grandfathered.
landmark said, "Hey, we're gonna bring all these
Be
people,"
a
you
mega
couldn't.
conference and
Yeah.
break up.
Yeah.
No. So I think I forget if they're at 9 or 10 in like
Yeah.
each division or
Yeah.
conference, whatever you want to call it. But so they're only vying for an AQ with those 9 or 10. They're not vying for it with the other
Yeah. Yeah.
17,
Yeah.
So I think that's a big difference. But the United East just did that merger with the
Yeah.
C
Yeah.
and they're one conference, they're
Yeah.
one AQ. So they have about or maybe exactly the same number of members as the MAC,
Mac. Yeah.
but it's twice as hard for them
Yeah.
to make
Yeah.
NCAAs.
I don't want to say it dilutes, but it does dilute your opportunity in a given season, right? And
Yeah. You have to beat more teams. You have to
teams
do more. You have
more.
to
Yeah.
win more to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
represent at that national level, and that's
Yeah.
not a bad thing, right? We're all
Yeah.
competitive, but that's tough to look at
Yeah.
sometimes when you're
Yeah.
comparing what other conferences do and what their access ratio is like
Yeah.
compared to yours.
Well, and a good season now has to become infinitely better,
Yep.
right? It has to be, hey, a good season could have been 10-3 in the old
Right.
way. Like that got us into the conference and maybe a automatic or at large, right? Like
Yep.
all of that stuff. And now a 10-3 might not even get you in the
Right.
door, like you don't under
Yeah.
no consideration, right? Like, so, yeah. Again, man,
There's a
I'm
lot
glad I'm
to think
talking to you because I'm thinking about like, oh yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, it
I
is.
I have the fortune of totally making up my own thoughts outside of the conference. I'm like, yeah, add five more, whatever, and it's not that easy. Um, let me can what the Palestra game day?
Yeah.
Are you are you looking at other things like that? Because I really do think that's awesome. I know
Heck,
it's crazy. I
yes.
really do think
Yeah.
it's awesome.
So, I'm glad you asked a follow up and I get an opportunity to talk about the girl college basketball. So this is year 2 that we're
Uh,
going. And in full transparency, this was the brainchild of some of my men's basketball coaches.
hmm
One of my first meetings I took with a coaching group when I got hired, I don't even know if I started yet, was men's basketball.
hmm
And they had said, how do we do something like go play a game at the Palestra or do this, do
Yeah,
that? So when I started in 19, I was like, that's a great idea. Like I went to the Catholic League games with my dad growing up in South Jersey.
yeah, big
Lester's
deal.
awesome. Like
Yeah,
that has to be achievable. I was fortunate to have some contacts with Penn from the work I do with men's rowing. So I had reached out about opportunities, and then COVID happened, and it was one of the
yeah,
first things when we came back that I said, we need to do this. So about this time last year, we started looking at financials, contracts. How much is this
mm,
actually going to cost to do? What can we do to make it special? Um, how do we want to format this?
mm,
Are we going to have to pay for it? Is it going to pay for
yeah,
itself? Like we had
yeah,
no clue. Like we
yeah,
were
yeah.
making best guesses, and it was super successful. We were fortunate to actually cover our bills
hmm
with attendees from the
Good.
event, from admission, which was great. We streamed everything. We worked with Mark Fleming at Moravian and his staff, and they did an awesome job with those games. We did post game interviews, and as soon as it was done, I was like, okay, are we coming back? Like, we have to do this again, right? And these are the things I want to change to make better.
Yeah.
So our ADs were all bought in. They were really smart and strategic about engaging Philly alums
Mm-hmm.
to come and do post or pregame receptions with them and talk about the school and fundraise. So that was really positive beyond athletics, just overall development for the institution. So yes, we're coming back this year. We're excited. We flipped genders. So if your men's team played last year, your women's team gets to play this year.
Mm-hmm.
And our goal is if it continues successfully and our schools want to keep it, we want to adopt a full rotation, integrate Wilkes and Lycoming in as well,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to participate and it be a, one and 3 year experience for
Yeah.
these teams to get to go and do
Almost
that.
like a travel, international travel. Hey, here's
Yeah,
another kicker. You get to do this,
yeah,
which is, again,
it's cool.
like it's
Not many
so
people get
cool,
to
so
play there.
cool, so cool.
Um, so yeah, it was funny. As soon as the ADs said yes about the Palestra, I told you my problem with,
Mm-hmm.
well, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
I immediately started saying like, well, what can we do for other sports,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't, same with football. Landmark basketball is great. It
Yeah.
is one of our most prominent sports. They're very successfully regionally and nationally, but it can't be all about basketball, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want the perception to be, well, like basketball gets this, but what are we doing for?
Mm-hmm.
So I have big ideas. I won't share a lot of them,
Grr.
but I'm looking at every sport,
Yeah.
right? So small thing, first time ever, the Landmarks combining our men's and women's golf championship. We're going to Shawnee Resort. So our students now get the opportunity to all come to a true golf resort, stay at a golf resort, play championship
That's awesome.
caliber course. We're going to do a cookout after day one so the men and women can mingle. A lot of these, smaller roster programs, they go to the range together, they practice together, they
Yeah.
support each other. So they don't get to see their teammates play because they're playing. So I'm hoping that's going to bring some great camaraderie to golf this year. We're trying to do something pretty special with our cross country stream. I'm nervous about internet capabilities in Huntington, PA, so I'll have a firmer grasp on that next week. But I think if things align, that'll be a really neat enhancement. I'd love to bring tennis together at a neutral site. What we do for swimming is incredible. My assistant, Sarah Twiggs, kind of runs our swimming championship, and it's one of the coolest things
Yeah.
we do with the amount of time, resources we put into that. So I have some cool ideas about soccer. I have some
Nice.
cool ideas about field hockey. And this might segue eventually because I think our partnership with Flow Sports is going to allow a lot of those crazy ideas to actually have some financial backing so we're able to do them.
Okay. So that's a perfect segue because I have to ask you this stuff because, um, you know, I am a quite the investigative journalist.
Yep.
Pulitzer Prize winner, all that kind of stuff. So I do have to ask you about that. So I jokingly refer now to the Landmark, jokingly, as
It's all
pay-per-view
good.
conference. Pay-per-view
Yep.
conference. That's better than calling the individual institutions University a paywall, which has gotten me banned by the Rochester women's soccer team on X. They blocked me. So I bring that up every time because I think it's hysterical. But all right, so not denying I'm a capitalist. So
Yep.
I'm totally into it. Like I get it. I totally
Yep.
understand I get it. You so you sign this big deal. I think it's 5 years. 5 years with
Right.
Flow Sports or something like that. Flow
Yep.
Sports. So and you basically put all landmark athletic contests behind a paywall.
Mm-hmm.
Can you because this goes down we might be here for another hour, by the way. Like this goes down in other routes.
I'm free. I got nothing to 1:30. You
Oh,
got
well,
me.
so we're good. So okay, so I'm not worried anymore.
I think it's 2 episodes now. This is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I might have to chop this. Like, hey, it's season one, see episode 1, 2, 3, like they do on Netflix. Maybe that's who I should call Netflix. This is a great series. Anyhow, Can you just talk through the decision? Let's just start there. And I've sort of let out my bias, and the only reason why I'm biased against it is not the capitalism part. It's just because I watched a ton of games, and landmark games are games that I
Yeah.
watch because, again, Catholic, the super successful men's team, Scranton, like you can't argue not to watch those guys. And so now, anyhow, so I'll let you speak now. So talk
Yeah.
us through the decision.
So the amount of emails commissioners get in general that are the same as cold calling for different like products, services, anything would astonish you. And I do not respond to every email. I ghost a lot of people because I don't want your scheduling software. Like I'm all set, you know. So
Oh,
the
that's great.
folks at Flow Sports love to give me a hard time about this because I ghosted them about a year ago. They reached out, and ironically, they reached out for the hockey conference I work with in Division Three, the New England
So
Hockey
not
Conference.
even the landmark. They were
Not
trying to
even the
get.
landmark. So they're like Flow Sports, I think, does the most with hockey, wrestling, and certain track and field and racing. So a lot of sports, I think, like they've had them, but their inventory and niche sports, I think that's kind of how Flow got on the map. So they were
Mm-hmm,
really trying to expand NCAA ice hockey. Period. They
mm-hmm.
had, I think, Atlantic hockey on there, Hockey East, a few of the D1 hockey conferences. So they reach out about hockey, and I'm like, delete, like, this is a generated email. It's not personal at all, you know, whatever. And then about a year later, I get a follow up that's essentially like, you work with all of these different conferences. Like, I just want to talk to you. And it was personal enough that I'm like, I feel bad just not responding. I'm going to respond. And I just said, hi, like, thank you for the outreach. Like, it's my understanding Flow Sports is paywall. That is a complete no-go for our schools. We won't be interested, but I appreciate the outreach. Best of luck. And I think most people just wouldn't respond to that. Colby at Flow Sports, who is one of my close friends now, came back and said, look, I totally get it. Here are a few links of recent partnerships we've struck with Division II conferences, and we're looking to spend the same kind of money and invest in the same way in Division III. So if the return really doesn't matter, no harm, no foul, but I'd encourage you to look at these links kind of thing. And I'm like, okay. Waited a few days, start clicking, and the investment they made in D2 were all 7-figure deals. And I was like,
For the
you know,
conference, like so the
well, for the
like
conference and the schools to
schools,
put
right,
the
right, right.
time
But the conference does the
on,
deal, and then the schools benefit.
correct, and then disseminates
Yeah, yeah.
essentially. So, you know, when I first got the note, I'm like, I'm going to get fired if I bring this to my presidents about pay per view because they don't want to charge parents. They don't want
Yeah.
to charge the casual
Right.
fan to watch our games, right? Like, that's not, you know, it might not be Division III philosophical, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then, you know, I'm like, well, let me just talk and like get what our valuation would be. And you know, in my mind, I thought it was going to be way lower than it ended up being, and I was like, what is your number that you're like, wow, if I don't bring this to my presidents, I might get
Yeah,
fired,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So when they came back and we saw the number, and I start doing my basic math about what that means for each institution, and it's guaranteed, it's not based on the amount of pay-per-views we have, it's not based on the amount of clicks we have, it's not based on the amount of viewers we have, it's truly just based on putting games up on that network. And their standards were things we were already doing as a
Mm-hmm.
conference. I was like, we have to look at this and we have to talk hard numbers and talk to the schools and say, is this number worth it for the parents to be frustrated with now having to pay for something they haven't paid for in the past? Is this worth it? And can we effectively tell our story to the why and like why this is helping your school, why this is helping the conference? And ultimately, obviously, we decided we could or would try very hard at telling that story. Um, and kind of my bigger picture, broader perspective is, you know, this I'm going to pull at you right now. This is a bad example to compare it to Division One, but I think when you look at how the media rights agreement impacted the strength of those Division One conferences, there are a lot
Oh,
of haves and have-nots.
yeah.
And I'm not trying to draw an exact parallel to D3. I know that that's crazy, but the Pac-12 imploded because their members were not happy with their media rights agreement.
Correct.
Bottom line, like
Took,
that is the
they
crux of
weren't making
everything.
enough.
So I
Yeah.
really needed to ask myself, do I see Division Three going this way? And are our opportunities and buy-in and payback going to be better at the ground level, or am I happy to sit back and watch it unfold?
Mm.
And my background in media and specifically broadcasting agreements that I had worked on in my former career, I said, I really think this is happening and coming
Mm.
to Division Three. Do I think it's going to happen everywhere? No, but I
Mm.
think this is happening. So we have an opportunity to get our first contract and maybe look at a renewal when others are looking at their first
First
contract.
contract. Yeah.
So we're a contract in. We've
Yeah.
already paid out how much money to our schools to
Yeah.
enhance our product, to
Yeah.
do fun things
Yeah.
with our student athletes. We can be ahead of the game here. So
Mm.
at my core, I think it's coming. I know
Yeah.
they're talking to another dozen Division Three conferences, and the other piece that I said was Flow Sports or any server vendor, whatever you want to call them, they don't have infinite resources to invest in every conference. Like every Division Three conference
No.
isn't going to go on Flow
No.
Sports. Are other companies going to do similar things maybe? And
Yeah.
at some point we might see a split. Sure. So if we like the vision and leadership of a company like Flow, they might only take two or three Division
Yeah.
Three conferences. So do
Yeah.
we want to be included on that, or do we
Yeah.
want to be scrambling?
Yeah.
And it's similar. You see it at D1, like who got on ESPN Plus from the
Yeah.
mid majors and who didn't,
Yeah.
and who are they working with, and how
Yeah.
is that different? Um, so I really believe in what they're trying to do, their leadership and vision. I'm a big fan of theirs. I think our product has value. I understand the frustration that it was free and now it's not free,
Mm-hmm.
but I was really cognizant with our negotiations to be as open as possible and still provide opportunities to view games in a reasonable amount of time after the pay-per-view off. So
Mm-hmm.
our games are free after 72 hours. I know that's
Mm-hmm.
a big difference from watching them live
Mm-hmm.
versus going back and watching a game 3 days later. I
Mm-hmm.
get it. But for me, like some of the scenarios I was holding on to was like, if a kid scores a game-winning goal and they're home at Thanksgiving or Christmas and want to pull that up for their family to watch, they should be able to do that for free,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
on our network and have it there. So, again, I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's ideal. I understand why people are frustrated. I think it's coming for more conferences, and I hope we're not the solo bad guy for much longer.
Okay. Well, you're just and this is, I don't want to say troublesome, right? From my perspective, it's just troublesome because hey, I can't watch the games the way
Right.
I use. But
Used to.
aside from that, because I'm a spec, right? Like I'm not the important piece here, but I don't need to. Not details, but obviously the individual members are being the athletic departments are being compensated for this. Like and I get you being the first, right? That is a very, very important. That puts you in a driver's seat that not a lot of other conferences could conceivably be in because at that point it might, like you said, two, three, maybe they want one
Yep.
more, but they're
Yep.
not going to pet, right? Like at some point, the economics they can't, right? Like if they're
Right.
getting a foothold, I get all that. Like is it that simple that they just approach you with some emails? Like I guess I'm
I
trying
know
to
it
think
sounds
like
crazy.
strategically Flow Sports. What are they like? Let's go after the landmark, or was it right?
Well, so what was interesting, I obviously asked that question,
Yeah,
like as part, like, why us? And
yeah,
they have a really distinct model and formula for what they were looking at for the schools. There were certain regions There's regional and national success in specific sports.
Yeah.
They're the type of schools that you have and overall institution strength, not necessarily athletic department strength. And they kind of did this crazy matrix, and
Mm-hmm.
we were one of their top 10 target conferences.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
You're not going to answer this, but how much do the schools get?
A good amount of money. I'm not
Okay.
allowed to state the exact number, but I would say it's seven figures, and I will say it's over seven figures. We didn't just creep into
Right.
that seven-figure mark.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is well over seven figures for 3 years.
Yeah.
You can do the math to maybe come up with an annual
I already did
average
the math.
of what
I
that
was
might
already like,
be.
what?
So
Yeah.
we have 10 schools,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you can
yeah. Yeah, that's a yeah.
and we want some to do conference wide initiatives like
Mm-hmm.
the Palestra that we might not be able to pay for wholly
Mm-hmm.
with admission
Yeah,
and
yeah,
those
yeah.
types of things. We'll get to that. But the way our presidents looked at it was, you know, this is I'm looking at this as an athletic department donation that
Yeah.
an alumni would make that we
Yeah.
would consider significant
Significant.
in
Yeah.
a given
Yeah.
year, and we are guaranteed to get this for
Mm-hmm.
5 years. If
Yeah.
one person signed up for Flow Sports, we still get it.
Yeah.
Um, so when we started having broader conversations about how we would use the money and what that money would do, our athletics
Yeah.
communications offices are continuously underserved,
Yeah.
understaffed, undersupported. So that's where our whole focus went for
Yeah.
years 1 and 2. How
Yeah.
can we maximize earmarking those funds for those departments, and what are
Yeah.
they going to use it for? And we're talking new equipment. We're talking the opportunity to hire more staff. We're talking the opportunity to hire more student workers that want to be involved and film and play by play the
Yeah.
game. And I'll say my first few weeks watching games, my poor husband, he's seen more landmark now than anything. It is so fun to me to watch a volleyball game with women's basketball or track and field student athletes doing the play by play because their teammates or their roommates are playing,
Playing.
and
Yeah.
they're having a lot of fun with it and doing an excellent job. And that's a sport that we didn't really have play by play for last year. And now
Interesting.
they're there, they're engaged. The school's able to kick them, I don't know, $50 for
Mm-hmm.
their time, and they might have been at the game anyway.
Yeah.
And now they have extra money to be able to work like on campus. Um, I think the positives that our schools are getting far outweigh the negatives and
Yeah.
the frustrations from those watching. And I mean, gosh, I was watching one of Susquehanna's field hockey games. They had like 3 cameras in replay. So I think there's some things I know. I think there's some things that people are like, you now we just have to pay for something that was free, and it's like, well, yeah, but it was never really free. Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
departments just
Yeah.
weren't really well
Absorb
supported, and now they
absorb the
are.
cost one way or the other. Yeah.
And I've seen the quality increase,
Mm-hmm.
and look, we've been doing it a month. It's not going to be perfect or
No.
across
Yeah.
the board. Like there's going to be hurdles here and hiccups along the way. But I'm so proud of the buy-in from our communications departments, and going to work on this together, and trying to elevate what we do as a conference. Because
Yeah.
before you ask it, I'll say that same competitiveness is there, amongst our
I'm sure.
schools.
Yeah.
They're looking at what other schools are
Mm-hmm.
doing and how they're using that money and what enhancements they're making, and they're saying, how do we do that, because like
Yeah.
we want to do that next. And it's cool to see.
A couple things. As a sales guy that I am, sales guy, um,
Yeah.
I would say that the Division 3 level, the one thing that's obvious, because it's to me the obvious ones. The one is communication/marketing. I never understood why schools didn't do a better job of that. I always thought like that's your tip of the spear. It's not the sport, right? Like you don't have it again comparison to Division 1. Division 1, everybody's wanting to sort of take a regular football game and put it on TV and all that does. And you don't have that at Division III. So what do you have to do? You have to make up for it. So how do you do that? Communications and marketing. There's nothing else. The second thing I always thought around Division III athletics in particular is they should have a dedicated development staff. So a dedicated fundraising, we're going to go out, because that's the only way I think these schools can ultimately will be able to sort of keep up, improve, do all the things that they want to do, is if they have that. And I think those are so I get it. Like I said, as a capitalist sales guy, I totally get the decision. I was going to ask you one other thing about that. Hang on. Oh, that leads me to this whole other discussion that I was going to have. Can you just talk a little, just from your experience? And again, I get it's maybe it's a little sensitive there, but can you just talk about because of this deal, you have a good sense as to the economics that athletic departments, whether it's challenges or opportunities that the athletic departments have. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because obviously, if it's a significant donation that goes from this to there, right? Like, it's a big deal that I don't think, at least I don't get an understanding. It's okay. Smokes and scotch in the morning are tough, like on your system.
I'm gonna drink the water real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. Let's just start that one over.
Yeah. So the whole Flow Sports deal, you're giving a donation to the individual institution. So you obviously have some insight into I'll just say, challenges, opportunities that athletic departments at a Division III level are experiencing today. So I was just hoping maybe you could sort of give some insight into that, like, costs going up. How do athletic departments, in the larger context of their institution, how do they keep to thriving? So I'm looking for you for some insight there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Each institution will treat their athletic department budget differently. Mm-hmm. So some are based on student athlete numbers and the number of student athletes that are at that school that may not otherwise be at that school because they're playing their sport. So, what are they paying maybe in tuition, and how can you place a dollar amount on that to now support that student athlete experience? Some haven't had budget increases in pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And costs continue to rise, specifically travel. So bus costs have been a thing that our schools have, talked through. And a lot of schools end up fundraising for additional experiences that to some people on the base level might consider just, it happens, like overnight trips, mm-hmm. right? Especially for us with Drew and Catholic being 4 hours, depending on the sport, like baseball is a huge one. Catholic has to overnight every conference game for the most part for us. Mm-hmm. And that's a big expense. For a baseball roster, and at least a night, if not 2 nights, because we play 3-game series, it is unlikely that any department would fully budget that in their program budget. Yeah. So how are they raising that money? Mm-hmm. And even simple things like going out recruiting. Mm-hmm. What's a recruiting budget, and what coaches are able to go to the big tournaments in a different region to recruit versus who stays local and takes advantage of game film. Mm-hmm. And is a freaking tournament charging them to watch the game film, right? We hate that. So there's a lot of layers for that they need to think about. And even gear, like, I don't know if teams throw up their gear stores a few months before,
Yeah.
and the parents and students are buying gear. Like they might get a couple t-shirts or maybe a
Yeah.
travel suit, but like they're buying a sweatshirt, they're buying a hat, they're
Mm-hmm.
using all of that. So I think our schools are getting more and more creative
Mm-hmm.
on how to fundraise and support these positive opportunities for their student athletes, because it's getting harder and harder to count on full budgets coming out of the institution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Foreign tours is another one.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'd be shocked, or spring break trips.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be
Yeah.
shocked if, Duke is paying for their foreign tours, right? But
Yeah.
our student athletes are working and saving up money to be able to go participate in
Yeah.
those, you know?
That's very true. I don't think, you know, it
I
obviously
mean, you ever watch the gear haul videos on like Twitter or
oh, yeah,
TikTok?
yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
It's unreal what they get.
Unreal.
I'm like, oh
Unreal.
my God. Like,
Yeah.
I remember being so amped my freshman year. We got 3 different T-shirts for
Yep.
practice, and they were
Yeah.
all a different color.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was,
That
you know,
was
like,
it.
you knew
Yeah.
what team you were
Yeah.
on for drill. It was like, all right, we're
Yep.
wearing purple. I'm like,
Yep.
oh, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Very true. Very true. I think we got two. We got two T-shirts, and then the game stuff. And then um, the shorts were just like black, like whatever.
okay, yeah.
Like it just didn't
And they
matter.
were, it's changed a lot too,
Yeah.
but like, I think we were Russell Athletic.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that's changed a lot too with like the apparel. It's yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
I
It's
it's just
constant keeping up,
yeah.
constant keeping up.
It's interesting that you say that, right? Because on the one hand, you do talk to the presidents, and I'm sure that's a decision. Obviously, the decision with Flow Sports is largely, the presidents are like, "Oh my gosh, like this would be fantastic," but right. And then in the context where you've said, and again, they're dealing with all bunch of different issues that when a budget perspective, but like you haven't seen budget increases since COVID, right? Like, well, there's got to be right. A commitment's a commitment from the university or the college to an
Yeah.
athletics department. Part of that is going to be that financial picture. So
And it's so interesting because it's just not Division 3. I mean,
no, yeah, yeah,
everyone in the country saw like the St.
yeah,
Peter's story, right? And
yeah,
and that was like a feel good story during March Madness. But
yeah,
then you were like, well, wait a second, like how's their gym leaking, and
yeah,
how much money are like, yes,
yeah,
there are scholarships, but like the haze of a full ride and
yeah,
how many there are is like completely ridiculous and
yeah. That's a
misperceived by most
con.
people.
That's a con,
Yeah,
as far
so
as I'm
so these
concerned.
these kids are paying to go to college there, and their gym is worse than our landmark gyms.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's so, or even oh my God, I'm blanking. Fairleigh Dickinson,
yeah,
their big story last year was like, oh, how cool is this student worker getting to
yeah,
be the head SID at and then it was like, but wait a second, why
yeah,
don't they have like
yeah.
an adult professional doing
Yeah,
that job? Like,
yeah,
this is crazy. So
yeah,
I think in college athletics in general, like we're using these feel good stories, and it's so hard to keep raising the bar, but people see what Alabama does and they want their
oh, that's it.
version of Alabama, and how
Yeah,
can we make it achievable, and what's the line to walk to have it be supplemented versus
yeah,
paid for? It's
yeah.
a difficult question,
Well,
and every school would answer it differently.
yeah. I think it's funny that you say that because one of the things we talk about in the soccer world, right, is just, there's this Division One or bust attitude among high school students about wanting to go Division One, and then you're like, okay, what is Division One? And they're like, it's basically Power Five programs. Like it's like five. This is what your impression is of the elite of the most elite
Correct.
programs, all well funded, all beautiful, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, all wonderful. But then you realize there are. I mean, this respectfully to Fairleigh Dickinson that they're just an hour away. Like, but then you have the realities of Division One, right? Like FDU is not Duke, like from
Right.
a right, and yeah, and you see it in of all things. If you see it in basketball, right? I even say, you know, not every football program in the country makes the money that Notre Dame makes in Alabama and the SEC, right?
You have
There's
travel
Rutgers that are in the
rosters.
hole 25 million every year, right? Like it just
Yeah,
doesn't.
schools have travel rosters. Everyone
Yeah,
doesn't get to be on the sideline. Everyone doesn't get a jersey.
yeah,
Every
yeah,
like
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
there are a lot of kids that stay home and watch their game at like the student union center
yeah,
with their teammates
yeah,
because they don't get to go on the trip.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very different, very different.
Yeah.
Um, hey, this is something I did want to bring up because we talk about it in soccer, Division 3 soccer, very particularly. So, and I'm bringing this up because I just posted something, or somebody posted something on X, Twitter, whatever we call it now. One of the things that soccer faces, I'm sure it might. Oh, hey,
Sorry. He's
that's
crying at
okay.
my feet,
See,
so
Jackie is asleep. She would love to see. Hey, there you go.
this is Hurley.
Oh, hi.
Love of my life. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
I
yeah,
know that.
I can't deal with him crying
Yeah.
at the
Gotta
desk.
hold, gotta hold, right? Like
Gotta
this is
hold.
scream for attention. Um, is right. Soccer is played. You play a ridiculous amount of games in a very very short window, right? And um, I'll just tell you what I posted because I really thought I was clever. Um,
Okay.
and I'll probably show it someplace. So I did some math, right? Leo Messi, arguably the greatest player of all time in professional soccer, played 71 games in 2011.
Okay.
Give or take, just extrapolating, that's 300 days. He played 70 games over 300 days.
Okay.
A Division 3 soccer player can play 17 games in 58 days. If you just extrapolated, did math, that would mean that they would play effectively 91 games in a given 300-day period, which is absolutely ridiculous when you think about it. So one of the things we talk about is how do you make the season longer? So I'm just
Mhm.
wondering, at what point does a commissioner become an advocate for student well-being? And is this something that that you look at, you advocate for, don't advocate for? Not particularly in this subject, but just in terms of the welfare of the student athlete.
Yeah, so I mean, the student athletes are at the crux of everything we're doing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're not supporting them and fighting for them, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
So the specific soccer model has actually come up a lot. The commissioners, just for your knowledge, we meet 3 times in person a year, and we talk
All of
about
that. Oh,
national
oh,
hot
yep,
topics. Yeah,
yep,
all
yep.
42 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And the Division 1 proposal was a big one that
Yeah,
we've been
yeah.
talking about, and what does that mean? And then trying to get our schools to understand it and think through some of the ramifications that maybe the coaches aren't talking about. The thing that stinks is that while NCAA legislation says you can play that many games, a lot of people that don't want to extend the season will say, well, that's permissive. If you think that's too many games, play 15 games,
Mm-hmm.
play 14 games. You don't have to play the full
Right.
games. But we both know, you ask any student athlete what they want to do, they don't want to practice more,
No.
they want to
Yeah.
play more.
Yeah.
So it becomes very cyclical. Um, you know, a lot of the decisions, especially with the presidents, revolve around timing of finals and how early students can come back to campus as opposed to the general student population, what
Mm-hmm.
facilities need to be open to support them when like the campus is otherwise generally shut down. If we extend into the spring season, especially in Division 3, what does that do for multi-sport student
Mm-hmm.
athletes? What does that do for student athletes that want internships or a year abroad or to work and make
Not
money?
soccer.
What was that?
Not soccer, right?
Yeah,
Like you just, yeah,
it's
yeah.
hard, and that's part of the Division 3 model
Mm-hmm.
now and philosophy, right? So
Mm-hmm.
again, is that something we really want to do? And then people don't love talking about it, but what about the additional resources and strain on athletic staff to support
Yeah.
a competitive soccer season in the spring
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just training?
Mm-hmm.
So it's difficult. I agree, it's too many games in a short window.
Yeah.
Um, and then even more so as you advance and continue to play more contests,
Yeah.
hopefully the better your team is. I just don't think there's a low hanging fruit at the solution,
Yeah.
which is challenging, because I think what could ultimately end up happening in Division 3 is what I said to start with, a medical group becoming involved and
Mm-hmm.
saying this is too many contests in too short a period of time and establishing a new minimum number, and now we're seeing the students play fewer games. Now,
Yeah.
if that was based on data and a national consensus, it would obviously be met with, you know, hesitation, but I think it might be an easier pill to swallow if it was national as opposed to an individual school
Yeah.
deciding not to do it.
Yeah.
Um, that's a conversation. Like, one of the big things we actually fought for as a group was in the national tournaments, the day of rest.
Yeah.
That was a big thing we had fought for, and now this is a new piece that we continue to have conversations about it. I'm interested to see what traction this game's in Division 1, because again,
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to keep comparing to them, but I believe if they can make inroads for the need to separate and provide more rest, and it's part of the overall issue with the US soccer model and
Yeah.
training,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do we see with that,
Yeah.
and is it something we can now replicate in
Yeah.
Division 3?
And they drive, I hate to say it, they drive so much of the conversation, right? I will say, like, that original model, the Division 1, what they want, it's, split fall spring, is a
Yeah,
non-starter, right? I
you
think
think so?
for what what I think would be helpful, I think the middle ground is you extend the season a week longer and then you start a week earlier. So you're just adding, give or take, 14 days. And I think that could make, again,
Yeah,
just simply, right? Like, just, hey, you got 14 extra days, and how does that stretch your season out? You're still playing the same number of games, but
well, two things on that, just for you to track on and think about. Last year, there was legislation at the NCAA convention to acclimatize soccer
mm-hmm,
and essentially have them come back earlier, almost
mm-hmm.
aligned with when football comes back, because
Yep,
football comes back earlier,
yeah,
and
yeah,
football goes through a full acclimatization of what pads you can wear, when you
yeah,
can put helmets on, when you can be in full pads, how often you can full tackle to the ground.
yep,
There was a proposal about doing something similar for all fall sports,
mm-hmm,
and what that training would look like, and how you could now ramp up to competition with some extra days.
mm-hmm.
The back end to keep an eye on, part of the way it's looked at by president's council and management council and the committees looking at these proposals, they're looking at when the national championship is, and I think in soccer that's the first or second
So,
weekend in December.
first, yeah,
So their
yeah,
concern is going to be, well, if we push it back, what does that do with finals?
yeah,
And it's challenging for us because most people in the day to day are like, it's only impacting two teams at the end of the,
yeah, yeah,
that's, or four, because it's a
yeah,
final four
four,
side. I think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
only impacting four teams,
yeah,
and the other 400,
yeah,
would greatly benefit from
yeah,
this, right? So that gets infuriating. But um, football has been capped at a 32 team bracket for
yeah,
years. So they don't follow the same bracket ratio that all other NCAA
yeah,
sports follow. So they're actually looking at the potential of expanding the bracket, which would subsequently expand the weeks of the
mm-hmm.
football playoffs, which would now see two schools playing later in the year than most
Ah,
institutional,
really? I didn't know
muck
that.
ups would
Yeah,
like. So if that passes, that now sets precedent for other sports
to
to
say
play a little longer.
longer,
And
yeah,
so even though, I get it, soccer is the focus, that's just something to keep an eye on and see what
mm-hmm.
happens there. Because if that passes and goes through, which I think it will, I believe it opens the doors for more of these
Competition,
conversations
yeah,
on,
yeah,
how we can play an appropriate number of games in a
yeah.
more appropriate time frame.
Yeah. I say I talk soccer just because of what I do, but it is, I do think it probably impacts a lot more sports than just soccer and how you look at a season, especially the starting end sports,
Mhm.
right? So the fall sports that start before school starts, and then
Yeah.
the programs I suspect that end later, like baseball, that go after
Yeah.
sort of school ends, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's a real.
So volleyball just got pushed back. They're a week later.
Uh huh.
And softball aligned with baseball to get
Yeah.
pushed back a week
Yeah.
later as well. And
Yeah.
baseball and softball are other sports that you can play 40 games.
Yeah.
And depending on what part of the country you're in, March
Well,
softball in Boston, as someone who did it, is not fun. It is not fun.
well,
So that's another one that constantly comes up. Could they split seasons? Could you play 10 games in the fall when the weather is beautiful? It's
yeah.
I'm in, I'm right outside of Boston right now. It's supposed to be 80 today.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well,
know, so
when you think about it too, that's funny you say that because I went to school in Ohio. You know, they trained in the fall a little bit, right? They had the window where they could train. They did their batting practice, all that kind of stuff. Then they would start the season, and the first thing they would do is they'd go down to Florida on a
yeah,
trip for 10 days, 7 days, or 10 days, and you
yeah,
think, hey, that's glorious for them, and you realize, oh, they're playing actual games because
yeah,
they can't
can't
until
play.
until May they can't play out, and yeah,
We played a quarter of our season in Florida, and when you
yeah,
actually think about that from a numbers perspective,
yeah,
that's crazy. That's a
yeah,
lot of games
yeah. Every year. It's not
every year.
every year, and it wasn't the right like. So I'll just say soccer gets the one every 3 years or one every 4 years they get to travel internationally. No,
Yep.
this was every year they got right. That was because of necessity, which also led to the necessity of creating. Hey, how many baseball fields are you seeing now? More and more that get turfed because
Mm-hmm.
now they could just play through bad weather,
Correct.
right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
it's raining. Like you can
You
play. You can
can't
keep playing.
shovel dirt,
You
but you
can't.
can go out and
Yeah,
plow the
correct,
field.
correct. Yeah, yeah. And when you hit the ball, you're shocked to your hands, like yeah, because it's so cold. That's interesting. Again, I know there's all the mechanics of it, and you just never realize like the complexity of it, of how you. Very few people understand the legislative
100%.
process, right? And
And
I think
who's
that's the big
president?
crux of it. It's not just waving a hand, hey, we're going to do this. No, there is so much that has to happen beforehand, and I think, although
Yeah,
I
and
do
there's
think
a
it's
lot
important.
to it, when
Yeah,
you're looking at it and you're talking about bringing students back to campus earlier, there's a price tag involved in that. And
yeah,
how is
yeah,
that price now absorbed in a budget, or
yeah,
how is it put back on the students,
yeah,
or is it
yeah,
permissive, so we're going to choose not to do it and still come back at the same time we've been coming back at, but now is that a recruiting advantage?
yeah, yeah,
Like it's there's so many
yeah,
layers that get
yeah.
looked at.
Well,
It can be frustrating
yeah.
to try
I
to get
and it's
done.
funny you said that again. I could just go back to my capitalist ways. I'm like, what would it cost? And you're thinking, hey, what do you just say because they're on a campus and whatever? Let's just say it costs $100, $200 a player to come back a day earlier, and
Mhm.
and then just do the math after that. So if you're coming a week earlier, it's 200, 3. I don't know all of the
Yeah.
costs, but I'm just sort of you do numbers, and before you know it, and I know for a fact, hey, School A has a great endowment. They got great alumni. They got the money. They'll ask, okay, they can do it.
Yep.
School B, you know what? They're like 6 months away from closing doors if they can't find relief, right? Like financial, and and when you take it that way, you're like, wow, that's a
It's a lot.
$200 a day is not a lot, but
But
for
for
a
some
school, by you
kids,
do the math, for some, it's a big, big deal. And I
yeah.
don't think
And
people
people,
think of it
yeah,
that much. Yeah.
no, and we've done it. You talk about the haves and have-nots in D1.
Yeah.
They're just as prevalent in Division 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. 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 All right. Well, let me look at my list. we
Okay,
sort of went far afield because this was fantastic.
good. Go ahead.
I'll just ask. This is a very last question for you, and then I'll let you get on with your day. Really do appreciate this, but wh- if you were to sort of look out into the horizon, like what do you think the biggest challenges are going to be for Division 3? Is it the economics? Is it something the demographics?
Yeah, so a big conversation right now in higher ed is they're calling it the enrollment cliff.
Hmm.
And we're closely approaching this cliff, which I want to say is 27 or 28 academic year. And
Hmm.
just based on the pure numbers of available college age students
Hmm.
will drastically go down because of families choosing not to have kids or have fewer kids.
Yeah.
So there's just not as many children, period, to draw from to go
Yeah.
continue their education. And because of student loans and just the overall cost of
Hmm.
higher education now,
Yeah.
I think this generation of student is more cognizant than my generation of
Yeah.
student when
Oh,
it comes
totally.
to what loans they're taking out. Can they go to junior college for a few years and get their like prereqs out of the way and then transfer to another school to take their core classes? Are we seeing more of a focus on the trades? There's a lot. So my biggest concern for Division 3 athletics is schools still being able to fund and provide excellent opportunities for the student athletes, because 9 times out of 10 that's why a student athlete is going to that school. They're
Hmm.
not saying like, hey, this would be a great school because of their PT program. That might be great for them, but at the crux of it, they're probably choosing that school because they really want to play soccer there.
Yeah.
They've really engaged with the coach, they enjoy their overnight, they like their teammates, and the fact they have my major is a great bonus. They're a great school. I'm going to be
Hmm.
able to walk away when I graduate with the job I want. Great. Um, so my concern is the overall health of the institutions, and institutions that may close or be absorbed by larger schools.
Yeah.
Being based up in New England, I've seen it a lot more up here
Yeah.
with schools closing. When I was with the NECC, we had two schools close, announced they were closing in the same year. And it
Hmm.
was very jarring and sad and impactful for those communities.
Hmm.
Cabrini, I think, caught everybody off guard, and that
That was
unreal.
unreal. Yeah.
And the way it came out as well, it was
Yeah.
just my heart broke for everyone on that
Yeah.
campus, the coaches, the kids. Like that sucked.
Yeah.
And I feel like they've been the most prominent school in the Mid Atlantic region that
Hmm.
really raised eyebrows. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are saying, wow, if this happened to Gabrini,
Yeah.
who
Who's in a
else?
great location, right? Like they're right outside of Philly. They got,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I think overall institutional health is big, and just rising cost periods
Yeah.
and schools being able to keep up.
Hmm.
I've been interested at the changes in Division 1 and schools choosing to cut programs.
Yeah.
For them, it could be different based on like money earning, not money earning,
Yeah.
but I'm worried about certain sports in Division 3.
Yeah.
There's a proposal at the upcoming convention in January that would further reduce the number of players you need to have a tennis team. It goes from like 6 to 4, I think,
Is that,
which
yeah.
like is it,
Yeah.
and you see both ways. Is it good because now schools can keep their tennis programs longer, but also as a 4-person team, a tennis
Yeah.
program? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Very
so
true.
hard. So
Yeah.
I'm concerned that these things are going to be happening over the next few years.
Hmm.
Plus, the mass exodus of people working in college athletics
Yeah.
as well is alarming.
Yeah.
Especially we had talked about our athletic communications folks and our athletic trainers.
Well, I think the
Um,
trainers too, that was another big one I didn't think of.
yeah,
Like they're just so over, I hate to say it, like, hey, we have a job for 5 people that 2 are going to do. That's what you're effectively asking somebody.
you do see that happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just So my heart just breaks, and the state of NCAA period,
Yeah.
and what that means for the future. So I always joke I'm a little too young to retire early, so I'm in it, right? But I think the next 4 to 5 years are going to be
Yeah.
an interesting ride. So
Yeah.
I feel fortunate to have the people I have to get to go
Yeah.
through that together, I guess.
Commissioner Boldvich, I really do appreciate you taking the time today. This was probably the most insightful conversations for me, an uneducated soccer goof, to get a glimpse into how it all works. So, really appreciative. Really wish you the best of luck. And I'll tell you what, I will see you at the Palestra games. I will make it
Yeah.
out for totally. Totally.
Shoot me
I
an email.
love that place. Like I said, I am totally going to pimp out the Palestra games because it is
Good.
a unique sporting event that I got to believe the kids absolutely love because it's once in a lifetime.
Well, keep in touch. I'd love you to be
Okay.
our guest there. That
All
would
right.
be awesome. So that'll be good. And thanks for having me. This was
yeah,
fun.
thank you. This was awesome. Appreciate it. All right.
Bye, Paul.
See ya.